Welcome to the Recover You podcast. I'm Kylene.
And I'm Patrick.
We are a couple in recovery
From sex addiction
and betrayal trauma. Together, we share our story to encourage you on your journey. It's here that we talk about sex addiction, betrayal trauma, mental, emotional, and physical health, faith, and anything and everything needed to recover you to your most authentic self that God created you to be.
Hello?
Hello, Patrick.
Hello?
Hello,
I was thinking
Patrick.
about with these microphones, I'm going to work on my rap career.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That was Hello, Dolly, just in case anybody was wondering.
Oh, yeah.
Except I said
I'm not
Hello,
familiar
Patrick.
with that. Is that a musical?
Hello, Dolly?
Is it a musical?
Yeah.
Why are you laughing at me?
It's a really famous
You know what I
musical.
got from that laugh? That you're like laughing at me because I don't know this musical?
Sorry.
All I'd have to do is be like, you know what kind of helicopter that is?
Oh.
And you wouldn't know. So
Whatever.
see, we all
Whatever.
have our own areas of expertise.
Okay, Patrick. Thanks for that. Yeah. Okay. Well, hello, Patrick.
Hello, Kylene.
Were you singing that just now?
I was being songful?
Melodic.
Melodic?
Okay.
Yes.
Well, welcome everyone to
Yes, back
this
on track.
episode of Recover You. Today, we are going to be talking about the idea of feeling chosen after betrayal. Someone submitted a question that asked us to speak more on how you worked through the challenge of comparison to other women and the feeling of not being chosen, and how you arrived at a place where you seem to feel chosen now. This is a sticky, complicated, multi-layered thing, so we're going to talk about it.
Okay.
So I think, when we started going through recovery, I noticed that the comparison piece was one of the sticky triggers for me. So there's a lot of overwhelm and trauma, kind of what I mentioned a couple weeks ago when we were talking about my experience, where you're flooded with a lot of information. So the first few months, everything is triggering, everything is overwhelming, everything is super scary, right? What happens over time is you begin filtering through and healing and balancing out, and your brain calms down. There's what I call sticky triggers. And these are the ones that are sort of the ones that are legitimately painful. Not that everything wasn't painful, but these are the ones that really hit core wounds, and they really stick around and come up frequently for you after sort of the dust has settled, the trauma dust, so to speak. So for me, one of the sticky triggers was comparison for a long time. There was a lot of insecurity around that, a lot of pain points. It hit me from a lot of different areas. And so I think that's very common. We talked about a couple weeks ago that the needs that a partner has are to feel chosen, to feel seen, and to feel valued and to feel prioritized through this recovery process. And feeling chosen is one of the most common because the behavior itself makes you feel the opposite, makes you feel like you chose other people, other bodies. It just depends on the behavior specifically. It could get more detailed than that, depending on how people were acting out. But, it's for the betrayed partner, it's always what were you looking for with that particular behavior, right? And actually, I want to pause on that because I didn't think about talking about that with this topic. But for us, our mind naturally goes to what were you getting from this experience that you weren't getting from me, right? But what I think is really important about that is we talk so much about the addict in recovery needing to identify that for himself. And so it's interesting that that's sort of an intrinsic gut instinct that the betrayed partner is well, what was this providing for you? And what we have to be careful about is realize it's not that there was lack in us. It's just that this thing did something. So, but that is important that the addict ends up being able to answer that. And we always recommend the book Unwanted to help people through that because it really connects the avenues of behavior with specific things. So for you, there is a big piece of you had these beliefs of you had these beliefs of unworthiness, and you had these beliefs of that you had this deep belief that things weren't going to work out in the end anyway. And so when you felt unworthy, the acting out behavior was something that you could get free praise, free accolades, free attention. Well, not free, actually, you paid for it, but still.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
it was like this space where it was like you knew that if you went into this space, like there would be a certain outcome.
Yeah.
And there wasn't anything that you had to do necessarily for them to say or do or whatever, right?
Yeah, I mean,
you were like in control. It was a control thing.
Right. And, my deep wounds were that I was unlovable and I had to solve my problems on my own. That's what I firmly believed deep to my core based on the things that had happened to me, through my life. I had been, infidelity on 2 previous relationships. And so, that defined or shaped what I was addicted to. And so you're right, Jay Stringer in Unwanted, and he has a lot of great, I encourage people to go seek out like his YouTube clips and things like that. But he's got this great one, and it's in SI 101. And he talks about inviting lust to sit down on your front porch. Don't let it rampage through your house, and don't build a wall so you never talk to it, but invite it to sit down on your front porch and really ask why it's there. And so he uses, and sometimes people get triggered by him using words like lust or whatever. And sometimes people get triggered by this notion of like being curious about why you were doing it. But you're absolutely right. There was a reason for that. And so I remember when I was discovered, I hadn't heard yet that sex addiction is not about sex. It's about how, what you're choosing to medicate your pain. And initially you don't believe that because you are deeply ashamed of what you've been doing. But over time it starts to make sense because in a sex addict's case, they have chosen the act of sex or whatever that may be, pornography, whereas an alcoholic may have the same mechanism, but that's what they've chosen to medicate their pain. So the problem is where alcoholism to a family system is very damaging. It is, we can't say, well, this one's more damaging than that one. They have different impacts. But what we're talking about here today is the impact of sex addiction is the notion, one of the outcomes can be the notion of comparison, that maybe you wouldn't get in alcoholism. Maybe you have financial difficulties or whatever, you know what I mean? Those kinds of things. But that is a pretty common one of well, why did you choose this person over you? And in my mind, it's like I wasn't choosing. Like I understand why you felt that way, and I agree with it. But in my mind, I wasn't choosing something over you. It's just a really weird.
That's so crazy.
Yeah, it's a crazy, because I like emotionally, love, heart health, all those things. It was always you, right? But the behavior indicates that it wasn't.
Right.
And so,
that goes into like when everything started coming out, one of the first things I kind of threw at you was like, you don't understand the concept of love.
Yeah.
And over time you have to prove to me that you understand what that means.
Right.
And I think that goes into answering this question of like, how have we ended up at the place where I feel chosen now? There's a lot of layers of things that you had to do consistently over time for me to get to the place where I could rest in that. But I want to talk about a couple things. One being, I had to choose myself. So I think anytime we have these wounds, one of the questions to ask is, how can I get to a place where I actually solve that problem within myself so that whether or not I ever get it from somebody else, I'm okay. And I think in intimate relationships, that's really important. I think as human beings, we always need to work on our own mental, emotional, and physical health intently enough and intentionally enough that we get to a point where we like who we are, and then say it's a bonus if I get this affirmation, this connection, this intimacy, whatever, with somebody else. So I had to do a lot of work. I had to go to therapy. I had to do EMDR. I had to do emotional processing. I had to do a lot of my personal healing work to get to the place where I said, I know as a human being, I would be fine without you. And so I think that actually does play into the answer of how can you get to the place. I had to work on accepting and loving myself as part of that.
And I know this conversation's from the perspective of the betrayed, but that's also something I had to work out. And ironically, probably almost unexpectedly, is when we have both reached more of a 99% of that feeling of we know we'll be okay by ourselves. And it's not because we're leaning into that definition as a reaction to our woundedness, but a real, genuine, authentic, vulnerable definition. We in turn have improved our relationship.
Yeah, well, I think that's important because two things that we've just mentioned. One is the idea you were talking about, facing your fears, facing your insecurities, talking to them, getting curious about them. That's one thing that people are very, very afraid of. But it only has positive results because getting curious about it helps you understand it, which understanding then allows you to work through and change behaviors. And the other thing is that basically we just said we had to heal to the point where we knew we didn't need each other to actually be okay with each other. And I think there's a lot of people in the world that are very afraid of doing that work. And actually, I'll hear betrayed partners say this sometimes. I'm afraid of getting to the point where, we do separate, or we separate, and then that means that, it doesn't work out. Like, it's if I take these steps, what if the end result is that we're not together, right? And that does take courage and that does take bravery, but I encourage you to do the work to figure that out, because if you can get to the point where you're good by yourself, then you are choosing to be in a relationship with someone. And that's when relationships can be good, is when you have two people that are healed enough to say, I don't need you in my life. I'm good by myself. But I want you in my life, and we work really well together, and I like you as a human being, and we're going to help each other be stronger, be better. We're going to push each other to grow. We're going to encourage each other. And all of that is done by choice, not coercion, not pressure, not, feelings of fear, right? It's not a fear-based thing. It's a choice. I think we always have to bring things back into choice. And so those are two things I think that were extraordinarily helpful for us, that are very scary for people to hear and to think about, that even having conversations, like we shared a couple weeks ago about, hey, we're not okay where we're at, or hey, divorce is on the table and I need you to know that that's the end result if things don't get better, or working on myself with the intention of getting to the intention of getting to the place where I go, I'm good on my own. And I know that I would be good on my own. Yeah. Those are really scary thoughts for people, but I would encourage that we pursue them, because I think that's where some of the authenticity, alignment, groundedness comes in a relationship, when you have that's two healthy people then saying, I want to be healthy together. And now I have more capacity, actually, because I don't have to get my identity from you.
It's, as you're saying that too, there's two parts to that. Number one, being able to say, hey, I'm going to be I would be fine being on my own. The other one is to be on the other side and hear somebody say, hey, I'd be fine on my own. Because a lot of people would be like, what do you mean? You mean you wouldn't starve without me, or you wouldn't, be emotionally distraught without me? And I think when you and I have these conversations, I always say, I know I'd be fine. I would be sad.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I know I'd be fine. And so, because I don't want to have a divorce, but and this is something that I try to communicate to a lot of folks too, is like, you're not really in control of that. You know what I mean? You're not in control of whether your partner files or not. So keep working on healing yourself and let the chips fall where they may. Keep working on that, because if all you're doing is trying to prevent a divorce, then you're not really going to focus on the root of the issue. And so, obviously good things always come when you present the best version of yourself, and that's the healed version of yourself.
Right. You just said something. If all you're doing is trying to prevent a divorce, then you're not going to be putting the energy into creating health.
Right.
So those are two totally different energy points.
Yeah.
One's fear-based, one's growth-based. Yeah.
That's right.
I think that's always important. We're always going to come back to that. Anything that is happening because it is rooted in fear is ultimately not coming from a place of health. So how do we shift that, right? So one of the answers to this question, I think, is that I had to do a lot of work on my own. I really had to, and I've, I think I've mentioned this before too. Like, there were like these little bouts throughout this process of, like, as soon as everything happened, talking about comparison and everything, very soon, like within the first year, probably within the first few months even, I immediately had this thought of, like, I know why, like, it would be a normal response to go, I think I want a boob job, or I think I want some plastic surgery, or, all these kinds of things. Because these thoughts, like, popped into my head as, like, reasonable responses, right? Like, I understand this thing happened. It hurt my feelings. It challenged my sense of self. And so I'm not saying anything against people who like choose that consciously because they want to and they've wanted to for a long time. I'm saying for me in this position, the decision that I made was I knew that if I did something like that, it would be reactionary to a pain point, not something that I deeply wanted because I wanted it. And so I was like, my commitment to myself was I need to get to a place where I like myself. That was an intentional goal that I had, that I said, I want to get through this feeling confident about who I am without changing anything about myself other than growth and healing, right? So that was something like a choice that I made. Because also I was very committed to this idea of like, I needed you to like me for who I was. I needed you to really accept me and like me. I also have always had this weird thing, like even when I went through cancer and I had a wig, I never wore it. I wore it like one time but I've always had this internal thing that's really bizarre to me, that like it feels like an imposter if I'm doing something that's not part of my body, that's not completely from me, that's not natural to me. It feels weird to me. There's just certain like little quirks like that I think I have mentally about like, so the wig thing was really hard for me because I was like, well, that's not authentically part of me. And so that felt, and I know other people, and again, this is not like my brain is not other people's brains. And this is not a judgment call. This is just sharing my personal weirdness around that. Cause like, I love that people wear wigs and people.
I mean, thank goodness it's like, in the case of cancer, it allows cancer patients to feel good, right? Which is amazing.
No, and that's my point, is that it's an amazing thing. So that's where I'm saying this is not like me saying you should feel this way. This is just how, for me personally, it was hard for me because it felt like it wasn't from my head. It wasn't from my body. And so I almost felt like I was like imposter syndroming. So it was real weird. Like I have things like that. So as we were going through this process, I had some of those thoughts too, which was like, I don't think that any body modification for me I think I would feel that way, the same, like I was wearing a wig. Yeah. So, but I also had this commitment of like, I really wanted to get to a place where I liked who I was the way I was. And even though that was hard and it was going to take a long time, I needed to do that work. And so that's what I headed towards. And then I also really wanted to feel like you liked me for who I was as well. And so that was part of the process too. Yeah.
Yeah. There was a lot that I had to do to make you feel like I liked you I don't think there was anything I could have said in the first 30, 60, 90 days for the most part that would have made you feel good about what I said. I think you needed me to stabilize, right? And so that work on, what it meant to love you, what it meant to prioritize you, what it meant to tell you that you were the most beautiful woman, like I would do it, but it didn't have an impact. And I think the reason why that was important is I think it's important for people to realize this, that like right after you get discovered and you're starting down this process, you can start to contribute to that feeling of being chosen. But the impact of those actions may not be felt in glimpses at 6 months and maybe glimpses again at 1 year. It may take years to get to that point. But the point being is you have to be consistent in how you apply that. A bunch of little actions lead to big results. And so, when you look at your spouse and you go, yeah, but I'm working on sex addiction recovery. What's your problem? Of course I prioritize you. I wouldn't work on sex addiction recovery if I didn't prioritize you. Like, it's not, people's minds aren't binary. You don't flip the switch to now I feel accepted. It just doesn't work that way. So it's going to take time. So how you feel it one day and how you feel it 1 year in, hopefully it's better at 1 year, right? How you feel it 5 years in, hopefully that's better. But I don't know if I think it's been our experience that I believe you feel prioritized today. But there are still moments when I think in your vulnerability and your just some insecurity or feeling hurt by the behavior when you think about it or something, like a sticky trigger, like you said, those still come up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And what's interesting too is like, at least for me, depending on what your core wound is, my core wound is that I'm unwanted, I'm unlovable, right? Your wounding drives your reception to the things that are happening around you. So, and I've mentioned this before, I would come home and it was fairly early on where you would start to meet me at the garage door. I think it was within a year, right? And so it wasn't like just 6 months ago when you started to do that. So logically, if you're an innocent bystander standing there, you go, wow, she really likes him. She really likes him. And then when you would talk about sex and how you wanted to continue to connect emotionally and physically and push through these things, you were doing that because you wanted that with me, right? But my woundedness, because I'm unlovable, says, well, I'm not receiving it. I'm just not going to receive it. And so that's what wounding does to you. So your husband or your partner may be the most committed to recovery. They may be receiving awards at the National Recovery Banquet. You know what I mean? And you still may not feel prioritized. And that's because that's your wounding that's really hitting you in that way.
Well, that's why I'm saying
how that
I agree with you.
It does take some time.
And that's part of why it's important that both people do the work to identify that. Because you're right. If you could do 10,000 things to make me feel chosen, but if I'm living into the belief that hasn't healed yet, then my energetic wall will be up where those behaviors will bounce right off of it. And I won't receive the energy of feeling chosen and seen and prioritized by you.
Right.
So there's a combination of, in relationship, there are things that you need to do to make me feel safe, to make me feel chosen. Like, that's true, because when you're in relationship, there is that interactional piece of it that's important. And in order for me to be able to receive that, I have to do the healing work to process the pain, to process and heal the wound and the things attached to the wound, so that I actually have the capacity to receive the energy that you're sending my way. So that's very true. So I think it's both. It's, I needed to choose myself. I needed to work on my own healing. But then I also needed to your point, there needed to be a lot of time. So I did things like EMDR did help. So like a lot of times, things like comparison wounds will come up with visual triggers for a partner. So you'll have an image pop in of what you think they were looking at or what you think they might be attracted to or something like that. And that's super activating and traumatizing. And so definitely those types of things were things that I would do I would have an actual response to, like going to EMDR and saying, hey, this image is popping up in my head. I need to process this specific trigger for me. So that work was very important as well.
I think when this is a question for you, and you and I have talked extensively about this, because I felt like I was unsafe to you. I may not have engaged in a way with you from maybe certain emotional, psychological, physical ways, to feel pursued, right, or prioritized. Knowing what I say now, remove that. How did you receive that when, let's say, when I was not maybe fully engaging physically? What are you talking about? Well, what I'm saying is like my opinion of myself and prevented me from being free to be right with you. So I pull back, and so are you like, why isn't he? I need him to pick me, and he's not. He's not leaning forward. Yeah, you were so
concerned about being safe because I was so traumatized, and because you were afraid of yourself. You were so concerned about being safe that you weren't. You didn't come across as confident in pursuit.
Did that send maybe the message to you, or the message that you filled in your head that I wasn't prioritized, or I didn't care?
It was annoying because the question that a betrayed partner goes, this is like a super irritating part of recovery. You had a lot of energy for your addiction. Why don't you have the same kind of sexual energy towards me when you're not in the addiction? Now, that doesn't mean I want to become a sexual object. We talked a couple weeks ago about how I wanted to feel pretty but not sexualized, right? There is a level and there's a time for all of this to fit in. So you want to feel pretty and attractive, but you don't want to feel sexualized. Like, I didn't want to turn into your pornography. I didn't want to turn into the next object, right? But there is a little bit of annoyance where, like, why aren't you at least like pursuing engaging? Why don't you have the energy? Why isn't the sexual energy putting towards me? Not in an unhealthy way, but an unhealthy way. So there is a lot of nuance to this, and I think timing and levels of healing goes into this as well. But when somebody is ready to feel pursued and they want you to view them in a healthy sexual way, by the time we got there, you were still afraid to do it, if that makes sense. So like, once I was past like the fear and I was feeling more grounded and not feeling objectified and all these kinds of things, like once I had kind of even worked through that, it still felt like I was like, but you had like all this time and focus and energy on it before. And I know that that was unhealthy. Like, logically, I know that that was unhealthy. And I don't want you to turn around and replace that with me, because also I know that that would be unhealthy. But there's still this internal feeling of rejection because of that. So that gets very confusing. And then over time, as you are trying to be so safe, you're like, well, how do I re-engage with you in a way that doesn't feel objectifying, that does feel healthy, but that's, so I get the conflict. I totally understand the conflict, but yes, it causes problems.
Yeah. Well, and you hit the nail on the head there. What I knew very deep to my core was the unhealthy side of that. I knew that. I could spot it. I could point it out in others. I could do all of that. What I didn't know and what I had to learn was how to do it in a healthy way. And so because I had created such havoc and damage on the unhealthy side, my psyche and mindset was do no more harm. And so it took me a lot of time to kind of learn how to, because I wanted to do that. You'd be like, how come you don't pursue me? I'm like, I want to. And like, I want to be that for you. And I remember thinking, and because there's some prompts in my journal where I said, I don't know if I can be what she needs. I don't know. And those were always kind of painful moments for me, because I was like, I'm really trying, but I don't know if I'm capable, number one, or if what I'm capable of doing is something that you can ever adequately receive to help you move forward. And those were some scary moments for me.
That's a really good example of why we say vulnerable communication is so important through this process. Because if we weren't talking about those and bringing them up to the surface, resentment would have continued to build in me, and the feeling of rejection paired with resentment would have continued to build, and the feeling of unworthiness and I'm incapable of giving her what she needs would have kept building in you, instead of us talking about it enough that we baby stepped into figuring it out.
Yeah. And sometimes, there's a lot of stuff through this process that aha moments go off. You know what I mean? That you just, you're not happy, you can do more, and then you get connected to a resource or you have a conversation and you're like, oh my gosh.
Well, and that's why too, the conversations are so important, because we have to hear something like 7 to 12 times for it to resonate, right? So if we have a conversation and then you're like, okay, but I don't really know how to resolve this, but now it's in your mind as something that's important to gather information on. That's why thinking about something or bringing it up is important, because you literally are saying, okay, brain, I want you to look for resources. That's what you're telling when you talk about something, is this is important, brain. Now I want you to think about it. So now the brain goes, okay, I'm aware that this is a thing. And then you have a conversation with someone in your support group and they share a story that maybe would have gone in one year and out the other one week. But that particular week you go, hey, I just had a conversation with my wife. Now I'm hearing this story. It parallels. They're talking about how they moved through it. There's a little nugget of information. 2 weeks later, you're listening to a podcast, would have listened to it, would have thought it was great information. But now you're thinking, I had that conversation with my wife. I had that conversation in a support group. This podcast is talking about what my wife was talking about. And that's answering 2 of the points that we were talking about. Maybe I can practice that. It gave us like a little tool that I'm going to go home and have this conversation, right? So that's why conversation is important, because it literally tells your brain, hey, this is something to look for in the world when you bring things into your conscious mind.
Yeah, and boy, that's so applicable. I've been working really, really hard with a lot of men, and then at work on defining what your vision is. And you want to work on 5 to 10 years in the future, And it's okay to do specific things, like let's say I want to have $1 million in the bank by this age, but also don't be afraid to use emotional things as far as a vision thing. Like I want to, it's okay to say I want to be the healthiest version of myself that I can be, right? Because sometimes and we've talked about this, like I didn't know that year 4 would be the way it was. I didn't know that year 5 would be the way it was. But I do know I was like, I want to be safe. I want to be a safe man. And everything that goes into that, I really want to be as safe as I can be. And I believe I'm there. I believe I'm a pretty safe guy now. And that was more of a feeling, right? It was more of a feeling where I got to that, but I had to do a lot of things. I had to show up for you. I had to, make sure that I'm not gaslighting you. I had to make sure that I'm safe for everybody around me, and you know what I mean. And so like it's sometimes if you articulate a big vision like that, like I want to be a safe person, I think when you aren't, and when you are, right? And stuff like that. So I really encourage people to take some time, write some things down, put it out there, and it is okay. Sometimes we talk about like, well, be careful like articulating what's going to happen in your marriage. It is okay to say, hey, I'd love to be married to my spouse, and I'd love to be in a relationship with her/him that is full of vulnerability and laughter and connection. Like it's okay to say that. Now, sometimes things happen, right? Like I want to run a marathon. Well, if you break your leg, you can't run a marathon. It doesn't mean your vision is crap. You know what I mean? It just means that sometimes some things happen. So
there's some tangible things to answer this question that I think helped. There was there was a thought that I had fairly early on around this idea, and I don't know if it popped up in my own head. I don't know if a therapist said this to me. I don't know where it came from. But it was this idea of just like practically speaking, that you probably saw thousands of different people, and through the practicality of sobriety, you were choosing me. So there was that thought that sort of came up of like, well, like in actuality, he's seen it all. If he didn't like me, he wouldn't be with me, right? So like there was that part of going there. He likes me enough that like having been exposed to everything that exists in the world, you are technically choosing me over all of that. So like that thought came into my mind, and so I'd kind of like try to pull on that a little bit through this process. I definitely went to therapy. I did EMDR for things like visual triggers, things that were sticky triggers for me. I noticed that I wasn't coercing you into recovery, so you were actively demonstrating that you wanted this life more than the behavior. That was helpful because you were demonstrating by action that you were choosing this over that. So that helped with that feeling chosen kind of thing. And for me personally, I know this isn't everybody's story, but for me personally, like you weren't physically with anybody else. So I think that helped a little bit in terms of differentiation. So in some aspects, I can say, this is unique, this is special to me only, to us only. Whereas conversely to that, we've talked about how words have been difficult because you were messaging and you were communicating with these people so much that the words I was like, well, what did you say? So that what didn't feel as different or as special, but like the physicality was able to be a little bit separate in some ways, because even though you never were physically with someone, you were engaging in physical acts with someone. So like that was really complicated, but some of those thoughts kind of helped me through the process as well. Reasoning in my own mind how to get through it.
Yeah, I think what you're highlighting too, and this is what's important for the addict to understand is going to recovery, putting good recovery plans in place, being open and honest, complying with things that are asked of you, doing the deep work, not skipping group, making sure you're at therapy. If group has you do a particular task, you do that task. And so those things are super important, and because it sends messages. It's not just saying I prioritize you. Like, actions are louder than words. And so it's really, and, conversely, and I know sometimes this is part of people's experience, the notion of relapse. I think every time you relapse, when you're looking at something as a prioritization, if you're not, let's say you do relapse, there's reactions to the relapse. The best reaction to a relapse is you're open and honest about it. And then you're like, these are the steps I'm taking to learn from it. And these are the things, the concrete actions I'm putting in place to further minimize and maybe eliminate the chance for a relapse. If you're just like, I just don't know what happened.
No, it just happened.
It just happened. Every time you relapse in a relationship, it can continue to send that message that you're not prioritizing your spouse. And so I think some spouses may not take it that way. I know you would have. And I think you very much would. And so I was very careful, and I worked really hard to make sure I had all the guardrails up to make sure that did not happen. And so you just have to remember that is the consequence of relapse, right? If relapse is your thing, it can happen. But man, make sure there's all kinds of resources out there, crash reports, all kinds of things that you can do. If you were going to go put a password on your phone, but you hadn't done it yet, and then you relapsed, get it done. Get out there and put it on your phone. I think that speaks
into, again, feeling chosen. Like, the addict also has to make a choice. Mm-hmm. What you have to sit down and go, what is most important to you in life?
Right.
If it is your partner, you're going to have to figure it out. Mm-hmm. Like, if it is your marriage and preserving your relationship, if that is more important to you than the addiction, then you need to do the work that you were just talking about. And I do think sometimes people don't do the work of really thinking through, why do I keep going back to this? Mm-hmm. What is it giving to me? To your point at the very beginning when you were saying, talk to the emotion, talk to the behavior, get curious about it. There is really no other message to be sent when somebody has the tools and resources and they keep relapsing other than, I'm not important enough for you to do the work.
Yeah.
And that's how it's going to be interpreted every single time.
Right.
And so that, of course, went into part of our healing, was that you did make that choice very early on. I could tell that I was important, that your own mental health was important, that I could tell right away that it wasn't just choosing me. It wasn't like I was coercing you, that you had to choose me. It was, I could tell right away that you didn't want to do that anymore. And so that did help me know, that you did want health, you did want me, you did want this family. So that did play into it. And I think if you had relapsed, I would have been like, you know what? You have the tools, you had the resources, you had the support group, you had the therapy, you had the blocker, you had my accountability, you had my boundary, and you chose something else. Mm-hmm. And that's how it would have felt. And that's how I would have responded. And my response to that would have been the end of the relationship.
Yeah.
Me personally. And that, that's not everybody, but that's how it would have played out for us, for sure.
Yeah. And I've joked about this before, you find out you're an addict. You're like, oh my gosh, I'm an addict. And then so you don't know how you're going to react when the thing that you're addicted to goes away, right? So it's that whole, I've joked about that, like, am I going to run off into the woods? Like, what's going to happen? I'm like, because
you have this belief that you are living into the belief that this thing controlled you as opposed to you controlling this thing.
Right.
And we were pretty quick to get into, nope, you're an adult human that doesn't have a monkey brain. You can be in control if you choose it. If you want it badly enough. And I want to clarify, I always say this to people when they talk about relapse and they have questions and concerns about this. I say there's 3 things that have to be in place. 1, they have to have the tools and resources. 2, they have to take action on them. And 3, they have to want it more than anything else.
Right.
If those 3 things are there, then it's totally possible. Mm-hmm. But a lot of times what happens is that third piece, the wanting it more than everything else, isn't always there. And I think that's because they're afraid that if the thing goes away, something bad is going to happen. And they have to bring that up into their conscious enough to go, what is it that I'm afraid of? Am I afraid of feeling pain? Am I afraid of all these, trauma memories that I have? Am I afraid of, not having the dopamine? I mean, whatever it is, right? Whatever it might be, you have to be honest about that. If you can't be honest about it, you're not going to move forward, but you have to be honest about that. And so if those 3 pieces are there, and we see it all the time, people that have those 3 keys, they're successful. So I think if someone is not successful, really ask yourself which one of those is missing. Do I not have the tools and resources? Well, we provide them. Look at there's some in the show notes. Make sure to check them out. Get connected to the tools and resources. Okay, well, sometimes maybe it's I have the tools and resources, but I'm not using them. Okay, well, like, are you doing what the group is telling you to do? Are you journaling? Are you journaling? #journaling. Are you?
You mentioned it.
Patrick's favorite. We should give a contest at the end of the year. How many times did they mention journaling? Use AI to calculate, and we'll figure it out. Are you doing the homework? Are you doing the self-reflection? Are you doing whatever it is that the exercises that your therapist is giving you? Are you doing the relapse prevention plans? Are you taking action on these things? Are you actually doing the things that the tools and resources are asking you to do? Okay, so sometimes that's missing. Do that. Okay, if those two things are in place, you have the self-reflection, you're doing these things every single day. Do you really want to get into recovery? That is a scary question that you legitimately need to ask yourself.
Right as you were talking there, I was thinking, when you get into this, recovery needs to be the highest priority, right? Highest priority, as if you're trying to recover from a cancer diagnosis or something very, very serious in your life, and then it's relationship, and then it's let's say your job, and I think. Back then, of course, it certainly was, right? And that was my thing. But I looked at today, I'm like, I use this full focus planner. The number one item of my big 3 every single day is recovery. Every single day. And it's been that for 5 years, recovery. What's my recovery? And it's just a reminder to me that like, hey, I was an addict, right? Calling things for what they are. I was an addict. And that was part of my behavior pattern. And so I need to make sure that I'm solid in the things that I'm supposed to be solid in. And so it's never I could argue today that I am healed, but I also don't want to take that for granted. And I don't want to, take you for granted. I don't want to take my relationship with the groups for granted. I don't want to do any of those things. I want to make sure that recovery work, which is good vulnerable work, which is good developing emotional intelligence, all of your recovery work changes over time. And I guess you could argue the 12 steps, right? That's the recovery work changing over time, right? And so I'm very focused on giving back now. How do I give back effectively? How do I help other people effectively? Because if I do that poorly, well, then maybe people don't get led to recovery the way they could. So I guess for me, it's always recovery. And so it's still recovery relationship work, right? I mean, it still very much is. And so the priorities never change. The activity level does change a little bit.
Yeah. So to answer the question about comparison and feeling chosen, I had to choose myself and my own healing. You had to choose yourself and your own healing. And that gave us the space and capacity to choose each other, knowing that we didn't have to. I think that was really important. But then also through the process, we had a lot of conversations. And I think that's also really, really crucial that if I felt insecure, I would verbalize to you that I was insecure and give you the opportunity to speak into that, right? And to reassure me. And to your point, words are empty without actions, but sometimes you need the words, right? So I knew sometimes I'll see that you're doing all these actions, but I needed you to verbally reassure me. And one of the things that your therapist said that was really helpful to us over time was when we got to a certain point after, I sort of had all the information and I would have triggers come up. He said, hey, why don't you ask her to communicate the need underneath the triggers? And so basically what that meant is like, hey, this image is coming up. Instead of, telling you about this image, I might say, hey, an image popped up, but, I think it's popping up because or it made me feel insecure or, whatever that means in that particular instance. And so over time, I just got better at I'm just going to communicate my feeling. Like I'll just walk up to you and be like, I need a hug. Yeah. I do that all the time, right? I need a hug.
And in that, I don't know if my memory's faulty on this, but what I seem to remember is you'd be like, I need you to validate me. And I'd be like, validate. And then I think what I learned based on what he said and everything, I'd be like, what do you need from me? Not necessarily like, I need to know that my neck is sexy. Your neck is sexy. You're like, well, I don't feel any better. And like, it's not really. I
don't think I ever asked that. Although people may doubt that after last week's episode.
Yeah, true. But I mean, but the point is you're right. There is an underlying. I'm just feeling very insecure right now. I'm actually tired and I need you to go buy me a pizza so we can sit here. You know what I mean? Like sometimes there's
I'm
some
usually pretty
different
good at
things.
just communicating like how I'm feeling. So
I know.
I think I just really tried to do that more consistently, specifically around if I had negative emotions coming up, trying to get underneath those emotions and then tell you what I was feeling. Right. So that was really helpful. And then so that I could get the verbalization from you, the verbal reassurance. And then what played out over time was the action of you choosing recovery over and over and over and over and over every day for the past so many years.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I was thinking about this. It's like I started off after discovery wanting very deeply and painfully to make sure that you felt loved by me, and really was like, oh, I just want to make sure that she knows that she's worth it. And it was really hard because as in my own denial and all of that, as we went into the full therapeutic disclosure, I had to catalog what I had done. I was like, oh gosh, you know what I mean? Like, how the heck am I ever going to get over this mountain? You know what I mean? Like, and like when you would say, well, like, I want you to demonstrate the same level of you could argue sexual energy towards me that you did there. And that was kind of like how you would say that. And I was like, but I hated that. You know what I mean? Like, I hated that. That's where all those feelings like, I don't know if I can do this. I just don't know if I can meet that need because I don't want to open, I felt like I closed the box and I don't want to open the box again because the box is, what's in the box is harmful. But what I learned over time was through, your example and you consistently pushing it and expressing your need is I could open the box at the point where it was a healed box at that point and express those things and push forward. And I feel, and you were so worth it to be able to, of all the things I wanted to prioritize, I wanted you to be the person that I prioritize, and to feel that this was not worth it, because worth it makes it sound like, oh yeah, the pain was awesome, but like to get through that process, and so it has recently, last 6-9 months, felt like the reward is here. The reward has arrived.
It's like a reward.
Yeah, it's like a reward.
If anybody watches TikTok, they'll recognize us.
Right. Well, I think there's been a couple things. I think you.
You just flew right past.
I did. Well, I don't have TikTok. Yeah,
it's like a reward. Okay,
sometimes,
moving on.
Yeah. But I mean, you have learned how to receive, and your healing has helped you receive when I'm putting out, and I've, through my healing, have learned how to receive what you're putting out. And then in that, we have both become more free to be. And so, and also, it's like if I initiate, physical intimacy with you, you like it, and I'm not, and I'm not going to pout if you say, hey, thank you, but I'm tired. Can we go watch a show? And I'm okay with that because I get tired too. You know what I mean? That's a human condition. We get tired. And so it's really okay. But the connection was made. The attempt was made. We're in the position to receive it in all of its beauty, whether it goes to physical intimacy or if it's just a gesture that leads to more emotional intimacy.
Feeling chosen and being compared, it's not all about sexuality. So just to clarify, when we're having this conversation, it's not all just about sex. Right. It's about being chosen as a human being seen, being valued, being loved for who you are. And your physicality does come into that, but it's a part of it. It's not the totality of it. So just to clarify, because we kind of like weaved in and out of that concept a little bit through the episode where we were talking about one thing and then we would talk about something physical and then so yeah, it's not all, feeling chosen is not all about feeling sexually chosen. It's about feeling like I'm seen, loved, prioritized, and valued as a human being. So I think if we had to like summarize and very succinctly, kind of talk through the process, it's that we have to recognize that there are wounds caused by the behavior itself. there are wounds that exist in the betrayed partner that were emphasized. So almost every woman has some variation of insecurity around their body or their sexuality. Like most of us have something. So that was already in existence, and then betrayal happens, and then that added wounds, and it exacerbated the ones that already existed. So we have to start with that fundamental knowledge that we have these pain points. We have to do the intentional healing work to identify them and to heal them individually. And then together as a couple, we have to work to understand what the wounding are and how we navigate in conversations and through the house and through recovery and through our relationship and through physicality. How do we heal those and connect together after or while we're doing the individual work so that we can connect as a couple. And that process takes time. And you mentioned a little bit of the phases there. You were trying to give me the words and the actions and the affirmation and the assurance that you were choosing me right in the beginning. And all of it fell flat because I was like, you literally just lied to me for a decade and you did all these things. So, but you needed to do that. And then instead of going, well, it's not working, I'm just going to quit, you needed to continue doing it. So the first several months you do it, I'm not going to receive that because I'm like, well, this is whatever. Do your words even mean anything? You've lied to me forever. But as you continue doing it and then your actions are showing, no, you're getting into sobriety, then I'm like, okay, well, all right, maybe I believe it like 2%. And then a year into it, I'm like, hey, he's been sober and he hasn't relapsed for a year. And his words kind of mean something. He's being really consistent. Then maybe I believe you 20%. And maybe it's starting to sink in and 20%, right? And then the second year passes and it's 50%. And then my healing work eventually got to the place where it's like, okay, I can actually receive and see what you're doing and I can receive the energy from it. Okay, now that's like 75%. Mm-hmm. And then you did the healing work and your energy shifted and then we could connect and then it's like, oh, that's 100%. Now our walls are down, right? So just understanding too, like even from the addict perspective, like this area in particular is probably going to be one of the hardest hurdles for you to overcome because the behavior was completely opposite of what she needs. So feeling chosen, like the behavior was the opposite of that. So healing that is one of the hurdles I think that takes the most time. And just because you're doing the right thing for a significant period of time doesn't automatically solve the issue. So it's a combination of healing work that needs to be done individually on both parts and a lot of vulnerable conversations and progression there about what's needed and how to do this and how to connect for the coupleship to actually feel secure in that area.
Yeah. Good point.
Anything else around this? Do you think that?
I don't think so. I think just just an encouragement to both parties. Like just keep going. Don't call it if you have the vision of being together. Don't call it at 6 months because you're not where you want to be. You know what I mean? Like if the vision of you being together and you see forward movement, like. It does take some time.
Yeah, this is the asterisk that I tell my clients. Mm-hmm. Hope has to be based in reality, which means that hope has to be based on behaviors that you're seeing currently demonstrated that can grow into something more. That's where hope can come from. If we have hope in something that is not currently, we have no evidence of it. So I know that so-and-so can be this kind of person. I know that so-and-so can get into recovery and they're not being that person and they're not getting into recovery right now, right? Then we're creating a story in our mind, a view of who, what we know they're capable of, not necessarily what they're demonstrating is possible.
Yeah.
So hope always has to be rooted in reality. It always has to be rooted in what am I seeing today that can build on and grow into something better. And so then to your point, if we are 6 months in, we're not going to be where we want to be as the end result. Like there's 0% chance that's going to happen in 6 months. But we might have planted the seeds and see the behavior and the trajectory is on the line that will get us where we want to go. Right. And if that's happening, then keep going.
Yeah. So and I think on the addict side, keep working hard. Always ask yourself, are you doing everything you can? Are you doing everything you can? Literally everything you can. I see people not do everything they can and they continue to cause some pain in life. So do everything. To
your point earlier, it has to be the number one priority. I do see people stumble with that a lot. People have busy lives. They have families. They have busy work. and I don't want it to sound insensitive or like I'm not taking into consideration the different lives that people have when I say this, but usually when people succeed, recovery has to be the number one priority. So if that means that you don't go on a work trip for, if you're able to say no, you say no to things, right? And I know sometimes that's not possible. And I'm not saying, get fired from your job. I'm just saying when you really think through, what is it possible for me to say no to so I have more capacity in my life so that I can make this the top priority? Because if it's not the top priority, you guys are going to struggle. And we see when people sort of drop everything and make this the priority that they have more success moving forward.
Right.
All right. Thanks, Patrick.
Thank you.
Every day is a new opportunity to choose health and freedom. Make that choice today, and we will see you next week. Woohoo! If you're listening to this, it means you've made it through an entire episode. Part of recovery is spending time engaging in healing and self-growth activities. We are thankful that you chose our podcast to be one of those activities today. Make sure you reward yourself for that accomplishment. If you've enjoyed this episode or this podcast, we would love to hear from you. Please take just a few moments to leave a rating and review, letting us know your experience with Recover You. We not only love hearing how these episodes are helpful, but ratings and reviews help others just like you who are searching for recovery information and support find the podcast too. We can't wait to hear from you. See you next week.